Okay, so today we'll be going over the use of electricity during the Siege of Pyongyang. This art piece is currently in the Met, and when I saw it, I just thought it was really interesting, so I wanted to talk about this one in particular. Now, this is a woodblock print, and it was made by Kobayashi Kiyochika during the Japanese Meiji period in 1894. The dimensions of the artwork is 37.5 by 61.8 centimeters. You'll see. So, Kobayashi Kiyochika, he made lots of like woodblock print art, kind of like this one, and they were mostly propaganda pieces for the Imperial Japanese. They all have like a similar type of style to them, but today we'll be going over this one. But before we get into that artwork, I first want to get into a little bit of the history and context so we can better understand it. So after the Sengoku Jidai, Japan closed itself off from all foreign influences for around 200 years. And they were pretty behind, technologically speaking. But then the United States, shortly before the Civil War, Commodore Matthew Perry went on an expedition over to Japan to force their country to be opened up for trade. And so after that, the Japanese began to quickly industrialize. They try to mimic the Western powers. They even reformed some aspects of their government to be more Western. They they hired Westerners to go and help them develop their infrastructure, their army, their navy. For the army, they hired like French advisors, French military advisors. The Navy, they had British military advisors. They bought new top of the line naval ships from Britain and France as well. So they were industrializing pretty quick. In the 19th century, it was a time of imperialism. So other imperialistic powers were expanding their influence and getting territories all over the globe, and Japan really wanted a piece of that as well. So that brings us back to this piece right here. Now let's talk about this art piece first. Now, what do we see here? So the title is the use of electricity during the siege of Pyongyang. So we can assume that the city here is Pyongyang, which is in Korea. Now, in the distance up here, we can see three soldiers operating a device that emits light into the city, so the artillerymen on the bottom can have a better shot at whatever they're trying to hit. And you can see the uniform difference between the soldiers and the officers. The officers, as you see, the two of them here, have a bit of like a table, and their uniform has this type of like embroidery on top of it that goes to the sides. That is a very French inspired design. So at first, the Japanese had a lot of French military advisors, but then they switched to Prussian ones after Prussia turned out to be the stronger military power in terms of land forces. Yeah, their uniforms are really interesting. You see a lot of Western designs compared to like if you look at the Chinese army or the Korean army at this time, this is a very Western styled uniform. Look at their caps, look at their epaulets on their shoulders, the use of boots, at least by some of the soldiers. And another thing that is not explicitly included, I mean, you can't explicitly tell in this painting, but at this time, soldiers and officers in the Imperial Japanese Army tended to use European sabers rather than katanas because trying to emulate the European powers so they can be respected on the world stage as one of them. And now we see some explosions on the side with some smoke, and the color contrast here is really cool, I think. But yeah, so this overall propaganda piece, right? It shows the Imperial Japanese Army as look at our army, look at our technology and how advanced we are, and we can easily, lay waste to the enemy even at night. So why are the Japanese fighting the Koreans and Chinese in the first place, right? And that goes back to this being part of the first Sino-Japanese War, which happened from 1894 to 1895. It was a conflict between Japan and the Chinese Qing dynasty. China and Japan both wanted influence over Korea at the time. Japan was rapidly modernizing, so they wanted to expand their sphere of influence in the region. But Korea historically was always like kind of a Chinese tributary state, so they would send tribute to China They were still independent, but they would pay tribute to China. So China considered Korea to be part of their sphere of influence. So when Japan wanted to push their sphere of influence into Korea, that is what started the war with China. China didn't really do too well in the war, though. Qing Dynasty China was very behind in technology because of very poor leadership. They didn't want to really industrialize. They wanted to block any new reform, and it was a disaster. So, uh, they did not win the First Sino-Japanese War. China, that is. The theme here, the overall theme I'm trying to say is it depicts Japan's desire for westernization. That is the greater picture from just a simple propaganda piece of, oh yeah, we're stronger than them. We can attack them at night and all that. They're displaying themselves on par as like a powerful Western power would. And this would go even further in a few years in 1904 when Japan defeated Russia in the Russo-Japanese War, which was a surprise to the world that, they were able to defeat what was considered a pretty powerful empire at the time, the Russian Empire. And all that followed the Russo-Japanese War, the treaty and how everything was decided and kind of sparked a lot of Japanese nationalism and even more Japanese imperialism and nationalism. And that would spiral down into its own thing later on. But that's beyond the scope of this video. Overall, I just wanted to show off this art piece. I thought it was really cool and explain what purpose it was and even a greater type of significance rather than just a simple propaganda piece.